Dear colleagues and distinguished guests, good morning. I'm Shawnna von Blixen from the Council of the Baltic Sea States, and it's such a pleasure to be able to speak to you all today. I couldn't be there in person, but I hope you find my message informational and inspirational all the same. What I want to do today is introduce you to the Barnahus model, convince you of its benefits for professionals and children alike, and to give you some resources that you can use in your daily work with children and in advocating for continued development of your national legislation and practice. But first, I will say just very shortly about my background. The Council of the Baltic Sea States is an intergovernmental organization. Our 11 member states, plus the EU, decide together what they want to work on as neighbors, to share best practices, and to cooperate on activities that bring value in different ways to our region of Europe. I work in the Children at Risk unit, where we work to fulfill the vision of the Baltic Sea region as a violence-free zone for children. To do this, we bring together audiences like the one you sit in today, experts, professionals, policymakers who are working to provide for the safety and support of children. They share learnings and best practices. They develop guidance and agree on recommendations and standards. And at the core of this work is our expert group with senior officials from the 11 member states. We're working on many important topics, for example, bringing the ban on corporal punishment from law into practice, supporting the end of trafficking and exploitation of children, and of course, establishing Barnahus around Europe. And over the last 20 years, the Baltic Sea region has become known internationally as a pioneer and model region. As such, we are privileged to be able to share our knowledge with countries from around Europe, including today with you in Slovakia. And in all of these areas that we work, we are prioritizing listening to the child, putting the child's perspective in the center of any support that they receive. Our work promoting this Barnahus model that I will introduce to you today is really the pinnacle of this concept. A Barnahus is an office where children go to tell about their abuse to many different people, but in a coordinated way. They do this in an environment designed just for them, in a process designed to prevent traumatization and re-traumatization, and in a process which is streamlined to feed into the criminal and welfare procedures. So what this means is that law enforcement, criminal justice, child protection, medical, and mental health professionals are all cooperating under one roof, literally at the same place, to provide rapid access to justice and care for child victims and witnesses of violence. So now, you might be wondering, why, or maybe even how, would professionals agree to work multidisciplinarily in this way? What is the benefit of making this kind of change? Let's start from the perspective of the child. The typical experience of a criminal justice or welfare procedure is often chaotic and traumatizing. This is a great visualization of what a typical process might look like without a Barnahus type setup. You have a little girl here. Her name is Robin. She is 5 years old. And from the time she told her teacher she was being heard at home until she got the help she needed, she had to talk to 15 different people about the same event. Just take a look at these quotes to see what this type of process is like for a child. I wanted it to be over, for me to get my normal life back again. But then it was months and months before that actually happened. I felt like giving up because they had been messing me about for so long. Why don't you big people talk to one another? Children often say they regret telling anyone, which of course is the exact opposite of what we all want. We know that child victims and witnesses of violence need to tell their story to trusted adults who can get them the support they need to leave the abuse situation and to recover from what has happened. Not to mention that a long, drawn-out process opens the door for the child's testimony to not be admissible in courts because too much time has passed and they don't remember all the details, or the child has talked to many people who have maybe told the child what to say, or who have unknowingly asked the wrong kinds of questions and thus have tampered with the evidence. And then there is what such a long wait is like for the child. We have another quote. "Waiting for the trial put my life on hold." So back to the why. Why do professionals from all those different agencies agree to change the way they work, to work under one roof, and multidisciplinary interagency teams? Well, we have heard from professionals in many countries, and they have told us that they knew they needed to change the way that they work, that they should do something else to meet the best interests of the child and to support their rights to be heard and receive information. Maybe some of you in the audience feel the same, but of course it's tricky to know how to make that change and what that change could look like and how to convince everyone about the same approach. Let's start by taking a look at what that new approach could look like. Again, through Robin's eyes. In this example, from the time she told her teacher she was being heard at home until she got the help she needed, Robin only had to talk to 3 different people. And look how happy she is in that green bubble. She says, "This place is great." And that might seem a bit silly, but in fact, we do hear from professionals that some children do ask, when can they come back and play and talk with their new friends at Barnahus? So I mentioned earlier that it can be tricky to know how to make system changes and what these changes can look like and to convince everyone about the same approach. Luckily, there are now many countries who have changed the way that they work for you to look to as an example. Iceland was the first country to work this way in Europe, inspired by a similar concept from the United States called the Child Advocacy Centers. Of course, many Nordic countries followed, and they changed the approach slightly to fit their own national, legal, and social contexts. But more importantly, you have many neighboring countries who have already changed the way that they work or are making fast progress to bring a Barnahus or similar setup online. On this slide, you'll see the basis for how Barnahus and similar setups are working. Again, each country has its own approach, but this broadly shows the basic idea. Firstly, under one roof, where the criminal and child welfare investigations are coordinated. They have planning meetings to gather all of the information they have about this child and the case, to plan the interview, and if there are any special supports that the child might need. Forensic interviews are conducted at the Barnahus. The recordings of these interviews form an integral part of the Barnahus model because it supports all of the services that come together under this one roof. The recorded interview ensures that each child who is interviewed in the Barnahus has the best possible opportunity to have their voices heard and believed, to have their testimony accepted as evidence in court, to avoid having to go to court. Research has shown that repeated interviews can be very traumatic for the child and cause re-traumatization. This can be even more harmful for the child than the abuse itself. So special measures need to be taken to provide children with opportunities to give evidence as few times as possible and in an emotionally and physically safe environment, while still securing a successful criminal investigation and judicial process. The Barnahus provides for all of these things. Forensic interviews are carried out by specialized staff members in a child-friendly environment. The interview is adapted to each child and follows evidence-based practices and protocols. The multidisciplinary interagency team is watching the interview from another room, and the interview is recorded. In the photo on the left, you'll see an example of a child-friendly interview room. It's a private space with a cozy feel and few, if any, distractions. To the right, you see an example of an observation room. The multidisciplinary team watches the interview live and can suggest additional questions to the interviewer if something comes up. The defendant's right to a fair trial and equality of arms are protected through this model. For example, sometimes the defense attorney is in the observation room and may pose questions, and other times they might have an opportunity to request an additional interview. I want to emphasize here that a key common criteria of Barnahus is that it ensures the evidentiary validity of the child's statement, in line with the principle of due process, and is preventing the child from having to repeat his or her statement during court proceedings. Take a look at what Lily has to say about her experience giving testimony in court. What happened to me at court was worse than the abuse. We recently interviewed an Icelandic judge who has worked with child abuse cases for a long time. And from the perspective of a judge, the purpose of an interview is to get to the heart of the matter. What has really happened? He saw firsthand the difference in the testimony from children before Iceland had a Barnahus and after. And from what he has seen, children giving testimony in court are under such stress that they often find it difficult to tell about everything. And in his experience, children who go to a Barnahus are much more relaxed and have the right environment and support to tell what happened in a manner that is admissible as evidence in court. This gets to the heart of the matter. It is, of course, also a great benefit that the Barnahus enables the forensic interview to be conducted as soon as possible, often within days or weeks of the first report, rather than the months or years that it takes the case to go to trial, if it ever goes to trial. This protects the evidence by capturing the story as soon as possible, and it provides the multidisciplinary team all the information they need to start service provision. Of course, the criminal justice process is just one part of the puzzle. The welfare process is just as crucial for supporting the child to tell his or her story and to get the support to heal from whatever has happened, even in cases that might never go to trial. Psychological support is thus a key component of the services provided at Barnahus, including short and long-term therapeutic services for trauma. These should be available to the child and to non-offending family members and caretakers. There are 4 essential aspects to providing therapeutic services at a Barnahus. Assessment and treatment is routine. Staff have specialized training. Information and support for arranging treatments is provided to children and their caregivers by the Barnahus, and crisis support interventions are provided when needed. Research and experience shows that effective treatment can minimize negative social, emotional, and developmental effects of trauma on the child. So treatment should be offered as soon as possible. And speaking of treatments, a Barnahus or similar setup has medical evaluations as part of its routines, either on the premises of the service or in urgent or complicated cases at a hospital setting. These medical assessments are, as far as possible, carried out the same day as the forensic interview by specialized staff who are trained in recognizing indicators of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, as well as child neglect. This serves a few key roles. Firstly, our medical experts point out that any child who visits a Barnahus is an at-risk child. Multiple forms of abuse and neglect may co-occur in any given child, some of which may be easily missed without a medical examination. It's not uncommon in a child who visits a Barnahus to find that even if she did not disclose any abuse, that she still has signs of malnutrition or poor dental care, for example. So it's a good opportunity to check the physical welfare of the child and make sure he or she gets the care they need. Secondly, a forensic medical examination can sometimes find and record evidence to be submitted to court. The Barnahus provides for the specialized equipment and the specially trained staff, either on site or with an agreement at a hospital. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, the medical examination provides reassurance. To hear that everything is okay, that your body is perfect, that you don't have a stamp on your head declaring you sexually abused and broken. It's an important part of the healing process for many children. We hear from the experts who meet children for a medical examination that the moment the child finds out they're okay, that they're not damaged, it's transformative. And of course, it's reassuring for the parents as well. So even if the prosecutor didn't get any evidence, the child gets a win. With the experts we've talked to, they note that this point also needs some advocacy among the different professionals to show that the medical evaluation is valuable for all involved, that it's not traumatizing for the child. Our experts say that having the medical evaluation routines from the beginning and having the medical professionals being a part of the planning meetings for each child is in fact one of the most useful ways to prove the value of having the medical professionals as part of the multidisciplinary team. Now, what I have presented is according to the best possible practices that we know to date, and it only skims the surface. Take a look at the summary on the screen of all of our standards, which cover how an organization should be established, the training and supervision required for staff, how to include a broad target group, the formalization of routines, how the space actually looks like and where it's located, collection and sharing of data, awareness raising in the community. Something like 26 countries are working progressively to achieve these standards. And I want to encourage you that it is possible to find your own way to progressively meet these standards, even before you are able to change laws. There is no one path to bringing a Barnahus or similar service online. And among your speakers today are representatives from two services in Poland and Croatia, who each have taken entrepreneurial approaches to launching their services. For example, in Poland, they have engaged a network of NGOs. And in Croatia, they have engaged with both city and national resources, including tapping into the national insurance scheme. In both cases, ongoing advocacy work was essential to convincing their local and national stakeholders to come on board. Be sure to pick their brains while they are here today. So now I have talked about the roles of a number of professional groups, the standards that they are working to meet at Barnahus around Europe, in order to provide child victims and witnesses of violence rapid access to justice and care. And I want to jump backwards just one more time to that why question from earlier in my presentation. Why do professionals from all these different agencies agree to work under one roof in multidisciplinary interagency teams? One answer was, of course, to provide the best quality of services we know to date that are in the best interest of the child and are supporting their rights to be heard and receive information. And it works. Children speak to fewer people and get streamlined and comprehensive help. Their testimony is taken early and is admissible in court. They find out that their body is okay and they have follow-up treatments. And of course, working like this has great benefits for the professionals too. What professionals say about working in this way is that they feel supported, like they have a team of people on their side who better understand how the process works from all angles and can support each other to meet their goals across disciplines. They, together as a team, feel like they're working in the best possible way they can to help each child. But don't take my word for it. Let's take a look at some quotes from professionals themselves. We don't need to plan and be responsible for the practical things around the child. Barnahus staff has the overall picture. Barnahus is a neutral place where we meet and collaborate on equal terms. So this prosecutor is saying Barnahus is a neutral place where the team is on equal terms. We win a lot of time since the partners plan together at the same location. We notice a huge difference when we have cases outside Barnahus. So the social worker is saying that cases that don't go through Barnahus take a lot more time. We get a lot of practical help around the planning and also when the child comes to Barnahus. This means that we can focus on what we are good at, the interview of the child. We can also contact Barnahus staff for help and support. This is from a police officer in Sweden. In Sweden, it's police officers who do the interviews. And this police officer says that they can focus on what they're good at. Barnahus promotes good cooperation between the child and adolescent psychiatry, the municipalities, and the other partners. This is from a psychiatrist. And finally, a pediatrician says, we enjoy having a well-functioning and robust machinery that facilitates good communication between the partners. It makes our job easier. Before I end my presentation today, I will say just a few words about Promise and share some important resources for you to get connected with us and to learn more about the Barnahus model. Promise is a program which, since 2015, has been promoting the spread of the Barnahus model throughout Europe. We are now in the second phase. The first phase launched a European-level dialogue, which explored the criteria for Barnahus and similar models in depth and developed standard-setting publications. We will soon end the second phase, which has supported 10 countries to take concrete steps towards practicing in line with the Barnahus quality standards, through developing their own national level dialogue and standards for working. Ultimately, we have been and will continue to work towards establishing Barnahus as a standard practice in Europe. Promise has already accelerated this process, and we strongly believe that the European approach that we've taken from the beginning will continue to be essential for the continuity of capacity building, advocacy, and provision of Barnahus and similar services at the national level. So in the end of November, we will be launching the Promise Barnahus Network. The network will become a member-led platform for long-term, flexible support, which is open to services and stakeholders alike. The network will galvanize continued and intensified support for the European Barnahus movement, promote harmonization and consolidation of good practice, build capacity to establish competent and committed Barnahus workforce across Europe, and in the longer term, we aim to establish an accreditation system. Network members will have access to peer support and university-level trainings, and to take part in establishing European-level support systems for Barnahus, such as a case management system, which will form the basis for a future accreditation system. And also in developing the Barnahus Forum, a conference bringing together all European Barnahus staff, envisaged to be held every 2 years. The first one will be in Stockholm in fall 2021. We hope you all will be there. These activities will have a kickstart in phase 3 of Promise, which will launch in early 2020 if we get the funding. And of course, we sincerely hope that many of your organizations in Slovakia will want to join the network. On to some resources that you should look into, and I apologize, most of it is in English, but maybe Google Translate can help. Our Bible, so to speak, is the Promise Barnahus Quality Standards. This is the standard-setting publication and essential reading. In it, you can read much more about everything I talked about today. There's a long version, an ebook, and a short version, which has many translations, including Hungarian, if that is helpful. If you'd like to learn more about how other countries have managed to bring a Barnahus or similar service online, you should read the yellow publication, Enabling Child-Sensitive Justice. On the legal side of things, our Compendium of Law and Guidance explains how the Barnahus approach meets the key obligations of the relevant EU and UN law and guidance. We also have a recent webinar which might be interesting to you on designing and implementing child-centered criminal proceedings. This webinar specifically looks at what legal and social professionals need to think about together to ensure effective justice and to avoid re-traumatization of the child. We have a library of other webinars which go deeper into everything I presented today. I encourage you to look into them. And finally, our newsletter. When we develop or even find new resources, we publish them there. In a few weeks, we will be publishing some exciting new tools, such as a child participation tool, which is filled with example surveys to gather data on children's experiences at a service. We will also be publishing a template for an interagency agreement. This is a key document that enables the team at a Barnahus to work together. So in closing, I thank you all so very much for your attention today. I hope that you have found some information or inspiration that you can take with you in your daily work with children and in advocating for continued development of your national legislation and practice. Please do contact me if you have any questions, and I wish you a lovely rest of your conference.